She appeared in his locked room at 3 a.m., knew secrets no stranger should know, and claimed she'd been dead for 70 years. But the family truth she revealed would change everything. The clock on the nightstand showed 2:47 a.m. when Jake rolled, over for what felt like the 100th time that night. Sleep just wouldn't come, no matter how hard he tried. His mind kept racing with thoughts he couldn't shake off, memories that played over and over like a broken record. 3 weeks had passed since he moved into this small apartment. The walls still felt strange and unfamiliar. Boxes sat unopened, in the corner, a reminder that he hadn't quite settled in yet. Moving here was supposed to be a fresh start, but some nights like this one made him question if he had made the right choice. The breakup with Lisa had hit him harder than he expected. They had been together for 2 years, and suddenly everything fell apart in just one conversation. She said they had grown apart, that they wanted different things. Maybe she was right, but it still hurt. The apartment felt too quiet without her laughter filling the rooms. Jake reached for his phone and squinted at the bright screen. Social media showed everyone else living their best lives while he lay awake staring at the ceiling. He scrolled through photos of friends at parties, couples on vacation, people who seemed to have it all figured out. It made him feel even more alone. A soft thud came from somewhere near his bedroom door. Jake stopped scrolling and listened carefully. The building was old, and strange noises weren't uncommon. Pipes creaked, floors settled, and neighbors sometimes came home late. But this sound felt different somehow. He sat up in bed and looked toward the door. The hallway light outside cast a thin line of yellow glow under the door frame. Everything seemed normal, but something made him feel uneasy. Jake had always been sensitive to his surroundings, picking up on things others might miss. Getting out of bed, he walked quietly to the door and pressed his ear against it. The hallway was silent now. He turned the deadbolt lock to make sure it was secure, then checked the chain lock too. Both were in place just as he had left them before going to bed. Jake walked through his small apartment, checking the windows and the front door. Everything was locked tight. The security system panel by the front door showed green lights indicating all was well. He must have imagined the sound, or maybe it came from the apartment upstairs. Returning to his bedroom, he noticed how the streetlight outside cast shadows through his window blinds. The patterns on the wall moved slightly as tree branches swayed in the night breeze. It created an almost hypnotic effect that usually helped him relax. But tonight was different. Tonight, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Jake had experienced this sensation before, usually right before important events in his life. His grandmother used to call it his inner knowing, a gift she said ran in their family. Thinking about his grandmother brought both comfort and sadness. She had passed away 2 years ago, and he still missed her terribly. She was the one person who truly understood him, who never made him feel strange for being different. After she died, Jake felt more lost than ever. He picked up the framed photo on his nightstand. It showed him and his grandmother in her garden, both smiling at the camera. She looked so proud and happy. Jake remembered that day clearly. She had been teaching him about her flowers, explaining how each one needed different care to grow properly. Some people are like rare flowers, she had told him that day. They need special conditions to bloom, but when they do, they bring magic into the world. Jake had never forgotten those words, even though he wasn't sure what she meant at the time. Now, lying alone in his apartment at almost 3 in the morning, he wondered if he would ever find his way to bloom. The apartment fell, silent again, except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Most of the world was asleep, but Jake remained wide awake, his thoughts drifting between past and future. He thought about his job at the local bookstore, which he actually enjoyed despite the low pay. Books had always been his escape, and being surrounded by stories all day felt like a blessing. His coworker Tom often joked that Jake knew every book in the store by heart, which wasn't far from the truth. The breakup had affected his work too. He found it harder to concentrate, and customers sometimes had to repeat their questions. His boss, Mrs. Chen, had been understanding and patient, but Jake knew he needed to get his life back on track. A gentle breeze rustled the tree outside his window, and the shadow patterns shifted again. Jake watched them dance across his ceiling, feeling oddly mesmerized. There was something peaceful about the movement, like a slow, silent waltz. As he lay there watching the shadows, Jake felt his eyelids finally starting to grow heavy. Maybe he would be able to sleep after all. He closed his eyes and took deep, steady breaths, trying to quiet his restless mind. That's when he heard it again. This time the sound was clearer. Soft footsteps in the hallway, moving slowly past his door. Jake's eyes snapped open and he held his breath, listening intently. The footsteps paused right outside his apartment, then continued down the hall. He waited for the sound of a door opening and closing, indicating that his neighbor had come home. But the sound never came. The footsteps simply faded away into silence, leaving Jake wondering if his tired mind was playing tricks on him. Looking at his door, Jake noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. The thin line of hallway light that usually showed under his door was interrupted by a shadow. Someone was standing right outside, completely still and silent. The shadow remained there for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a few seconds. Then, slowly, it moved away, and the light returned. Jake lay frozen in his bed, unsure of what he had just witnessed, but knowing that tomorrow night would bring answers he wasn't prepared for. The next evening started like any other. Jake had managed to get through his workday at the bookstore, though he felt tired from the sleepless night before. Mrs. Chen had noticed his exhaustion and sent him home early, telling him to get some rest. He was grateful for her kindness. After a simple dinner of leftover pizza, Jake decided to try reading before bed. His grandmother had always said that books could calm a restless mind. He picked up an old mystery novel from his collection and settled into bed with his back against the headboard. The story was about a detective solving strange cases in a small town. Jake found himself getting lost in the pages, which felt good after days of not being able to focus on anything. The characters felt real, and their problems seemed simpler than his own complicated life. Around 10:30, Jake paused his reading to stretch his neck. The apartment was quiet except for the usual sounds of the old building settling for the night. He could hear Mrs. Rodriguez upstairs watching her evening news program, and somewhere down the hall, someone was playing soft music. He was about to return to his book when something made him look up from the pages. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. The light in his room seemed different somehow, softer and warmer than the harsh overhead bulb usually provided. That's when he saw her. A woman stood near his dresser, about 6 feet away from his bed. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with dark brown hair that fell in gentle waves past her shoulders. She wore a dress that looked like it came from another time, maybe the 1940s, in a deep blue color that seemed to shimmer slightly in the dim light. Jake's first instinct should have been fear or shock. A stranger in his locked apartment would normally send anyone into panic, but instead he felt an overwhelming sense of calm wash over him. It was the strangest thing he had ever experienced. The woman looked at him with eyes that seemed familiar, though he was certain he had never seen her before in his life. Her expression was gentle and knowing, as if she recognized him even though they were strangers. She stood perfectly still, not threatening in any way, just watching him with what looked like patience. "Who are you?" Jake managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. His heart was beating faster, but not from fear. It was more like excitement mixed with confusion. The woman smiled then, and Jake felt something stir deep in his memory. The smile reminded him of someone, but he couldn't quite place who. It was warm and familiar, like coming home after a long journey. "You don't need to be afraid," she said softly. Her voice had a slight accent that Jake couldn't identify, and it carried a musical quality that made him want to keep listening. Jake looked toward his bedroom door, still closed and locked, just as he had left it. The windows were shut tight, and there was no other way into the apartment. Logic told him this was impossible, but here she was, standing in his room as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "How did you get in here?" he asked, setting his book aside on the nightstand. His hands weren't shaking, which surprised him. Usually, unexpected situations made him nervous, but this felt different. "The same way thoughts enter your mind," she replied cryptically. "The same way dreams find you at night." Jake studied her face more carefully. There was something timeless about her features, as if she could have lived in any era. Her skin seemed to have a soft glow, and when she moved slightly, it was with a grace that seemed almost otherworldly. "I don't understand," Jake said honestly. "None of this makes sense." The woman moved closer to his bed, her steps making no sound on the hardwood floor. She stopped just a few feet away, close enough that Jake could see the intricate details of her dress. The fabric looked expensive and well-made, with tiny buttons and delicate stitching. "Understanding isn't always necessary for truth," she said gently. "Sometimes we must simply accept what is happening and trust that it serves a purpose." Jake found himself nodding, though he didn't know why. Her words felt wise, like something his grandmother might have said. The thought of his grandmother made his chest tighten with the familiar ache of missing her. "You're thinking of her now, aren't you?" the woman asked, as if she could read his thoughts. "She was very special to you." "How could you possibly know that?" Jake asked, feeling goosebumps rise on his arms. He hadn't mentioned his grandmother to anyone, and certainly not to this mysterious woman who had somehow appeared in his locked apartment. The woman's smile grew wider, and she leaned slightly closer. Jake caught a faint scent of lavender and something else, something that reminded him of his grandmother's house on summer afternoons. "There are many things I know about you, Jake," she said, using his name, though he had never told it to her. "I know about the nights you can't sleep thinking about choices you've made. I know about the loneliness that follows you even in crowded rooms. I know about the gift you carry, the one your grandmother recognized." Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. No one had ever spoken to him about having any kind of gift. His grandmother had hinted at it sometimes, talking about his inner knowing, but they had never discussed it directly. "Who are you?" he asked again, more urgently this time. The woman reached out slowly, as if asking permission, and gently touched his hand. Her fingers felt warm and real, definitely not a dream or hallucination. The touch sent a strange energy through Jake's arm, like a gentle electric current that wasn't unpleasant at all. "My name is Elena," she said, her voice soft but clear, "and I've been trying to reach you for a very long time." Jake stared at her, his mind racing with questions. Elena's touch felt familiar somehow, like the memory of being comforted as a child. The way she looked at him suggested she knew him far better than any stranger should. "But why?" Jake asked. "Why me? Why now?" Elena's expression grew more serious, though her eyes remained kind. She squeezed his hand gently before letting go. "Because you've been waiting for me, haven't you?" she said quietly. "Deep down, you've always known that someone would come, someone who would help you understand who you really are." As the words left her lips, Jake realized with a start that she was absolutely right. He had been waiting, though he hadn't understood what for, until this very moment. Jake sat there staring at Elena, trying to process what she had just said. The rational part of his mind kept insisting this was impossible, but something deeper inside him recognized the truth in her words. He had been waiting for something, his entire life, though he never knew what it was. "I know this is overwhelming," Elena said, settling gracefully onto the edge of his bed as if she belonged there. "But I need you to listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you." Jake nodded, finding his voice. "You said you know things about me. What kind of things?" Elena's eyes seemed to sparkle with an inner light. "I know that when you were 7 years old, you had a recurring dream about a woman in a garden. She was picking flowers and humming a song you had never heard before, but somehow knew all the words to." Jake felt his mouth drop open. That dream had haunted him for months when he was little. His parents had taken him to a doctor, worried about his restless nights, but the dreams eventually stopped. He had never told anyone the details, not even his grandmother. "How could you possibly know that?" he whispered. "I know that you can sense things before they happen," Elena continued, "like the morning you woke up knowing your goldfish had died. even though it looked perfectly healthy the night before. Or the day you felt sad for no reason, only to learn later that your neighbor's dog had been hit by a car. Jake's hands began to tremble slightly. These were private memories he had buried deep, experiences that made him feel different from other kids. His parents had always dismissed these incidents as coincidences, but his grandmother had listened with serious attention. "I know about the music box," Elena said softly, and Jake's heart nearly stopped. "What music box?" he managed to ask, though he already knew exactly what she meant. "Your grandmother's music box, the one that played her favorite song until it broke right before she passed away. The one you keep in your closet because you can't bear to throw it away, but it hurts too much to look at." Tears began to form in Jake's eyes. He had never told anyone about the music box. It had been his grandmother's most treasured possession, a beautiful wooden box with intricate carvings that played a hauntingly beautiful melody. When it stopped working during her final illness, she had asked him to keep it safe. "She told me you would have it," Elena said gently. "She told me many things about you, Jake." "Told you?" Jake's voice cracked with emotion. "When? How?" Elena stood up and walked to the small desk near his window. She picked up a framed photo Jake kept there, one of his favorites showing his grandmother in her garden. Elena looked at the photo with a soft smile as if greeting an old friend. "Your grandmother's name was Margaret Rose Thompson," Elena said, turning back to face him. "She was born on March 15, 1925, in a small town called Willowbrook. Her favorite flower was lavender because it reminded her of her own grandmother's garden. She made the best apple pie in 3 counties, and she had a laugh that could make anyone feel better." Jake wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Every detail Elena mentioned was absolutely correct. But how could she know these things? Elena reached into what appeared to be a small pocket in her vintage dress and pulled out something that made Jake's breath catch completely. It was a photograph, old and slightly yellowed with age, but perfectly preserved. "She wanted you to see this," Elena said, holding out the photo. With shaking hands, Jake took the picture. It showed 2 young women standing in front of a house he didn't recognize. One of them was clearly his grandmother, but she looked to be in her early 20s with the same bright eyes and gentle smile he remembered. The other woman looked exactly like Elena, down to the same dress she was wearing right now. "This was taken in 1947, Elena said quietly. "We were the very best of friends." Jake stared at the photo in disbelief. "But that's impossible. This would make you—" "Age works differently where I am now," Elena said with a sad smile. "Time moves in circles rather than straight lines." "Where you are now," Jake repeated. "What does that mean?" Elena sat back down beside him, her expression becoming more serious. "Jake, I need to tell you something that will be hard to hear. I died in 1947, just 3 months after that photo was taken." Jake felt the world tilt around him. He looked at the photo again, then at Elena sitting beside him, solid and warm and undeniably real. "I died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning," Elena continued. "I was on my way to see your grandmother, actually. We had made plans to go shopping for wedding dresses." "Wedding dresses?" Jake asked weakly. "I was engaged to be married," Elena explained, "to a wonderful man named Robert. We had our whole life planned out together. But sometimes life has different plans than the ones we make." Jake set the photo on his nightstand with trembling hands. "So you're a spirit? A ghost?" "I don't really know what to call myself," Elena said with a gentle laugh. "I just know that I exist in a place between worlds, and sometimes, when the conditions are right, I can visit people who need help." "But why me?" Jake asked. "Why now?" Elena's expression grew tender. "Because your grandmother asked me to watch over you. Before she passed, she was worried about you. She knew you had inherited the family gift, the ability to sense things others can't. She knew you would feel lost without her guidance." Jake thought about all the times since his grandmother's death when he had felt completely alone in the world. No one else seemed to understand his sensitivity to energy and emotions. No one else took his intuition seriously. She told me you would go through a difficult time, Elena continued. A time when you would question everything about yourself and wonder if you belonged anywhere. She asked me to wait until you were ready to hear the truth about who you are and where you come from. What truth? Jake asked, though part of him was afraid to know. Elena reached over and took his hand again. Jake, your family line carries something special. Your grandmother had it and she passed it on to you. You're what some people might call sensitive to the spiritual world. You can perceive things that exist beyond the ordinary reality most people experience. Jake had always suspected there was something different about him, but hearing it confirmed felt both relieving and terrifying. Your grandmother wanted you to know that you're not alone, Elena said. She wanted you to understand that your sensitivity is a gift, not a burden. And she had something very important to tell you, something she never got the chance to share before she died. What? Jake asked urgently. Elena's mysterious smile returned, the same expression that had puzzled him when she first appeared. She wanted you to know the truth about your father, Elena said softly. The truth she kept hidden to protect you, but that you're finally ready to hear. Jake felt his heart pound as Elena's words sank in. The truth about his father. This was something he had wondered about his entire life, but his mother had always avoided the topic, and his grandmother had simply said it was complicated. My father? Jake repeated, his voice barely a whisper. But my mother told me he left before I was born. She said he didn't want the responsibility of a family. Elena shook her head sadly. That's not what happened, Jake. Your mother promised to tell you that story to protect you, but Margaret always planned to tell you the truth when you were old enough to handle it. Jake ran his hands through his hair, feeling overwhelmed. I don't understand. Protect me from what? From the pain of knowing what really happened, Elena said gently, and from the danger that knowledge might have brought when you were younger. Elena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. The moonlight caught her profile, making her appear almost ethereal. When she turned back to Jake, her expression was both sad and hopeful. Your father's name was David Mitchell, she began. He was a good man, Jake, kind, intelligent, and deeply in love with your mother. He didn't abandon you both. He never even knew you existed. Jake felt confusion wash over him. What do you mean he didn't know? David was in the military, Elena explained, moving back toward the bed. He was deployed overseas just a few weeks after your mother discovered she was pregnant. She tried to reach him to tell him the news, but communication was difficult in those days. Elena sat down again, her hands folded in her lap. Your mother was young and scared. Her own parents had disowned her when they found out about the pregnancy. The only person who supported her was your grandmother, Margaret. Jake listened intently, hanging on every word. This story was completely different from what he had always believed about his origins. David was killed in action 3 months before you were born, Elena continued softly. He died not knowing he had a son on the way. Your mother received the news through official military channels along with his personal effects. Tears began to roll down Jake's cheeks. All his life, he had imagined his father as someone who had chosen to leave them. Learning that his father had died without even knowing about him was both heartbreaking and somehow healing. But why keep it secret, Jake asked. Why not tell me the truth? Elena reached into her dress pocket again and pulled out what looked like a small key. Because your father came from a family with the same gift you have, Jake. The same sensitivity to the spiritual world. His family had a long history of what some people called strange abilities. Jake stared at the tiny key in Elena's palm. It looked old and ornate, with intricate designs carved into the metal. Your father's family had enemies, Elena continued. People who feared their abilities and blamed them for things that went wrong in their community. There were threats made against the family, dangerous people who might have hurt you if they knew you existed. So my mother and grandmother decided to hide my identity, Jake said, beginning to understand. Exactly. They created a story that would keep you safe while you grew up. Margaret always planned to tell you the truth when you turned 25, but she got sick before she could. Elena held out the key toward Jake. This opens something that belongs to you, something your father left behind that your grandmother kept safe all these years. Jake took the key with shaking hands. It felt warm against his palm, and for a moment, he could swear he felt a slight vibration, as if it contained some kind of energy. "What does it open?" he asked. "The music box," Elena said with a gentle smile. "Your grandmother's music box wasn't broken, Jake. It was locked. Margaret sealed it with this key to keep your father's belongings safe until you were ready to receive them." Jake's mouth fell open in shock. "You mean all this time your father's letters, photos, and other personal items have been hidden inside the music box?" Elena confirmed. "Margaret was waiting for the right moment to give you this key and tell you everything." Jake stood up on unsteady legs and walked to his closet. He pushed aside some hanging clothes and reached up to the top shelf where he had stored the music box after his grandmother's funeral. He had avoided looking at it for 2 years because it caused him too much pain. The wooden box was heavier than he remembered. He carried it back to his bed and set it down carefully. The carved decorations on the lid looked even more intricate in the lamplight, and Jake realized they weren't just random designs. They were symbols, perhaps meaningful to his father's family. "Before you open it," Elena said quietly, "I need to explain something else about why I'm here." Jake looked up from the music box, the key still clutched in his hand. "I exist in what you might call a between place," Elena said. "It's not heaven or hell or any place with names that people use. It's simply a space where souls go when they have unfinished business in the world of the living." She stood up and began pacing slowly around the room, her dress rustling softly as she moved. Most spirits move on quickly to whatever comes next, but some of us stay behind when someone we love needs help. Your grandmother couldn't move on knowing you were struggling without understanding your true heritage. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "So she asked you to come?" "She asked me to wait until you reached a crossroads in your life," Elena said. "A time when you were lost enough to be open to truths that might seem impossible. Your recent heartbreak, your move to this apartment, your sleepless nights full of questions about your purpose. Margaret knew these signs would indicate you were ready." Elena stopped pacing and looked directly at Jake. "But here's what you need to understand. This is my only chance to deliver her message. Once I help you open that box and you learn the truth about your family, my job will be complete. I'll have to move on to whatever comes next." Jake felt a sudden panic. "You mean you'll disappear?" "I'll go where I'm supposed to go," Elena said with a sad but peaceful smile. "I've been waiting in the between place for over 70 years. It's time for me to move forward just as it's time for you to step into your true identity." Jake looked down at the music box, then back at Elena. "What if I'm not ready? What if I can't handle whatever is inside?" Elena walked over to him and placed her hands on his shoulders. Her touch felt warm and reassuring. "Jake, you've been ready your whole life," she said firmly. "You just didn't know it yet. Your father was brave, your grandmother was wise, and you carry the best of both of them inside you. Whatever challenges this knowledge brings, you have the strength to face them." Jake took a deep breath and looked at the key in his hand. It seemed to pulse with a gentle energy, as if it was eager to unlock the secrets it had been guarding. "Will you stay with me while I open it?" he asked. Elena nodded. "I'll stay until you've seen everything inside. But then, Jake, I'll have to say goodbye." Jake held the small key between his fingers, feeling its weight and warmth. His heart was racing, but not from fear anymore. For the first time in years, he felt like he was about to discover something important about himself, something that would change everything. Elena sat beside him, her presence both comforting and bittersweet. Knowing she would have to leave soon made every moment feel precious. "Take your time," she said softly. "There's no rush." Jake nodded and carefully inserted the key into a tiny lock he had never noticed before, hidden among the carved designs on the music box lid. The key turned with a soft click, and suddenly the box began to play its beautiful melody, the same haunting tune he remembered from his childhood. But this time, something was different. As the music played, a hidden compartment slid open in the bottom of the box, revealing a small collection of items wrapped in faded blue silk. With trembling hands, Jake unwrapped the silk bundle. Inside were several folded letters, tied together, with a ribbon, a few black and white photographs, and what appeared to be some kind of official military document. "Start with this," Elena suggested, pointing to the military document. Jake unfolded the paper carefully. It was his father's military service record, showing his full name, rank, and the details of his service. At the bottom was a section marked "Next of Kin and Emergency Contact." His mother's name was clearly written there, along with her address at the time. "He listed my mother as his emergency contact," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. "Because he loved her," Elena said, simply, "and he was planning to marry her when he came home from his deployment." Jake picked up the photographs next. The first one showed a young man in military uniform, smiling at the camera. The resemblance was unmistakable. Jake was looking at his father's face, and it was like looking into a mirror. They had the same eyes, the same smile, even the same way of tilting their heads slightly. The second photo showed his father with a woman Jake immediately recognized as a much younger version of his mother. They were both laughing, their arms around each other, looking completely happy and in love. "She really did love him," Jake whispered, studying his mother's face in the photo. "She never stopped loving him," Elena confirmed. "Even after all these years. The story she told you about him leaving wasn't meant to hurt you, Jake. She was trying to protect you from the pain of losing someone you never got to meet." Jake set the photos aside gently and picked up the bundle of letters. His hands were shaking as he untied the ribbon and unfolded the first letter. It was written in his father's handwriting, addressed to his mother. The letter was dated just a few weeks before his father died. In it, David wrote about his excitement to come home and start their life together. He wrote about wanting to buy a small house with a garden, about hoping to have children someday, about all the dreams he had for their future. He wanted children, Jake said, tears streaming down his face now. He would have been so proud of. "You?" Elena said, her own voice soft with emotion. Jake read through several more letters, each one revealing more about his father's character. David Mitchell had been thoughtful, funny, and deeply caring. He wrote about missing home, about the other soldiers in his unit, and always about how much he loved Jake's mother. In the last letter, dated just a few days before his death, David wrote about a strange dream he had been having. He dreamed of a son with dark hair and curious eyes, a boy who seemed special somehow, gifted with abilities that others didn't understand. "He dreamed about me," Jake said in amazement. Elena nodded. "Some connections transcend the physical world. Jake, your father's spirit knew you were coming, even if his conscious mind didn't." At the bottom of the bundle was one more item that made Jake's breath catch. It was an address book, old and worn, with pages of names and contact information. Jake flipped through it and found an entry that made his heart skip a beat. "Mitchell, family, Uncle Thomas and Aunt Helen," he read aloud, followed by an address and phone number. "Your father's brother and sister-in-law," Elena explained. "They're still alive, Jake. They live about 3 hours from here, and they've wondered about you their whole lives." Jake stared at the address in disbelief. He had family he had never known existed, people who might understand his abilities, who might be able to tell him more about his father and his heritage. "Your Uncle Thomas has the gift too," Elena said. "So do his children, your cousins. They've been waiting for you to find them, hoping that someday you would learn the truth." Jake felt overwhelming joy mixed with sadness. Joy at discovering he wasn't alone in the world, that he had family who might understand him. Sadness at realizing how much time had been lost, how many years he had spent feeling like an outsider. "There's one more thing," Elena said, reaching into her dress pocket one final time. She pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "This is from your grandmother. Her last words meant specifically for you." Jake took the paper with reverent hands. His grandmother's familiar handwriting covered both sides in her neat, careful script. "My dearest Jake," the letter began. "If you are reading this, then Elena has found you and you now know the truth about your father and your family. I hope you can forgive an old woman for keeping these secrets, but I did what I thought was best to keep you safe. Jake continued reading through tears. His grandmother wrote about watching him grow up, about recognizing his special abilities, and about her pride in the young man he had become. She wrote about his father's family and their long history of spiritual sensitivity. You are not broken or different in a bad way. The letter continued. You are special, Jake. You have been chosen to carry on a gift that can help others, just as your father would have done if he had lived. Use your abilities with wisdom and compassion, and never be ashamed of who you are. The letter ended with words that made Jake's heart swell with love and gratitude. Remember that love never truly dies, Jake. It just finds new ways to reach us. Every time you feel lost or alone, look for the signs around you. We are still with you, your father and I, watching over you and cheering you on. Go find your family, my dear boy. They have been waiting for you. Jake folded the letter carefully and looked up at Elena. She was smiling, but he could see sadness in her eyes too. She was right, you know, Elena said. Love never dies. It just changes form. Jake felt Elena's presence beginning to change, becoming lighter somehow, as if she was slowly fading. You're leaving now, aren't you? He asked. Elena nodded. My job here is complete. You have everything you need to move forward now. She stood up from the bed and walked to the window one last time. The first hints of dawn were beginning to show, on the horizon painting the sky in soft pink and gold. Thank you, Jake said, standing up too. Thank you for bringing me these answers. Thank you for helping me understand who I am. Elena turned back to him with that mysterious smile he had grown to love. Thank you for being brave enough to listen. Thank you for keeping your heart open to possibilities. She walked toward him and gave him one final embrace. Jake could feel her warmth, her reality, but also her gradual fading. Will I ever see you again? He asked. Not in this world, Elena said gently. But someday, in whatever comes after this life, we'll meet again, and your grandmother and father will be there too. Elena stepped back and began to shimmer like sunlight on water. Remember, Jake, you're never truly alone. Your family is waiting for you, both the living and the dead. Go to them. Let them help you understand your gift. As the morning light grew stronger, Elena's form became more and more translucent, but her voice remained clear and strong. Live fully, Jake Mitchell. Love deeply. Use your gift to help others find their way. Make your father proud. And then she was gone, leaving only the faint scent of lavender and the echo of her words in the morning air. Jake stood in his room for a long moment, holding his father's letters and looking at the empty space where Elena had been. He felt different now, transformed by the truth he had learned. The loneliness that had plagued him for so long was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. He picked up his phone and dialed the number from his father's address book. After 3 rings, a man's voice answered. Hello, Uncle Thomas, Jake said, his voice steady and clear. My name is Jake Mitchell. I think you've been waiting for my call.